Hello, everybody. I'm Sudha. I'm happy to join you for our weekly live Q&A where we talk about autonomous vehicle business and autonomous vehicle data. I started with autonomous vehicle business, and then we've been talking about AV data for almost like 3-4 weeks now. I think this is the 4th week. So this is a live Q&A. That means I have a topic and I'm going to talk on the topic and explain some lessons, but I'm hoping that you would have questions like always, and we can have a fun conversation. You can interrupt me anytime. No question is a bad question. So for those of you joining me, I'm Sudha Jamte. I teach IoT business and autonomous vehicle business at Stanford Continuing Studies, and I have a series of courses at driverlessworldschool.com. And my most recent course is Autonomous Vehicle Business course, which is an archive of my Stanford material that's free that you can check out. And I have a course that is open for registration called The Business of Autonomous Vehicle Data. So I've met many of you in conferences recently, and you've been asking a lot of questions about that. So if you have any question about the course or autonomous vehicle data or any topic related to what we are talking, you can interrupt me anytime, or you can fill in your question comments on the side. I will see it, and if it goes with the flow, I will talk to you right away. Otherwise, I will pick it up soon. Okay. So what is autonomous vehicle data? First of all, what is autonomous vehicle business? So as a recap, autonomous vehicle is the technology that is being built to make the car, the truck, any kind of new robotic vehicles drive itself autonomously without human intervention. And there are 5 levels to it. So today we are not at level 5 where the car can just go off and park itself and come back, drive me while I sleep. Doesn't matter, right? That's not where we are today. But that technology is being built. The autonomous vehicle business is everything that comes with this change. So what I call as we are going towards a connected autonomous world, what I call as the driverless world. So autonomous vehicle business is the business of getting this car to drive autonomously and disrupt a whole bunch of value chains, and how to manage that value chain and create new opportunities. So the way to look at it is using 3 different lenses. One is there's a technology stack of what is needed for the car to drive autonomously. What are the technologies are going to move from the mobile, from the phone, to the mobility stack in the car? And that is one way of looking at it. And you can go build a whole bunch of technologies and see how it impacts different industries. Then there is the other way, which is to look at specific industries and say, how is my industry impacted, or where's an opportunity in my industry and how I can look at it. The third way is to pick a problem and say, hey, can this problem be solved using autonomous vehicles? So there is a autonomous vehicle, a robot, which is roaming around in Mountain View, and it's actually deployed by Google for the Mountain View library here. And they basically said, hey, people don't return books on time, and some of the people don't have mobility and they cannot come out and drop books, but we want to give them books so that they have company at home and it's good for them. And so the solution was this robot goes around to houses at a specific time, it's a pilot, and picks up the books and comes back. So one way of looking at it is looking at a problem and then see how that can be helping somebody. And from there, you could build out a whole new business. In this case, it's a public library. It seems a goodwill exercise, which is very good, but it could be for something else. So last week, I was at IoT Innovatech LATAM, first time for me in the LATAM area, and at Chile in Santiago. And it was an amazing conference. And I have been talking about autonomous vehicle, this whole business, looking at it, one of the lens was the business lens, right? The problem solving lens. And I've done this exercise in my class. And I met an entrepreneur who is building the same solution and solving for that problem in Santiago. It was mind blowing. So the exercise we did in class was, I random said, okay, give me some problem that you want to solve. And somebody said bikes are, sharing the roads with cars and they're not safe. And how do we manage that? Hello, Richard. Thank you for joining me. So I'm just warming up here, and I'm just giving a summary of, what is autonomous vehicle business. Then we'll get to data. And I'm not going to go through all my summaries of the last 4 weeks of data, but I'm going to go into the data from AI in the car. That is the topic for today. And I believe last week when we were talking about AV data, we were talking about all the data that comes from outside into the car. And we didn't cover all types of data when we ran out of time, because I do this for 1 hour. And so I might cover that based on time, and you can always interrupt and ask questions. So I was talking about how I have done this exercise in my Stanford class about, hey, pick a problem and let's build an autonomous vehicle around it. There's no one way. Let's figure this out. And it was a live exercise and keeping bikes safe. And so this person started out saying, hey, I want to keep bikes safe. And the way to do that is I want to get data about where bikes ride in my neighborhood, take it to the city, and I want them to regulate that cars can't drive around this time when kids are going to school. That is the place from where this person started. And then it evolved as the class discussion saying, hey, you could build some kind of IoT sensor that the biker that is attached to the bike, and the bike can communicate with the other cars in the road. Or it could be a bike carries some kind of camera or sensor, and it collects data from the road, and the data can inform the city folks. And the data might not be used directly to inform city people. It could actually offer services. So it could be a IoT solution, it could be a data solution, it could be a product with that, it could be a whole data as a service model business, whole bunch of, like, you need more and more data about the car, about the location where the car is driving, like the street view, but for autonomous vehicles. And then the same thing expanded to, hey, this is not just the cars. What about the cameras that can actually be mounted on cars and on the bikes? And maybe you can actually mount the same cameras on trucks and start getting that data. Overall, if the goal is to keep the bikes safe and get information about the road, it doesn't have to be done by the bikers only. So it kind of had many tentacles to many branches about how the same business can be built in many different ways. So why I'm saying that now is, in Santiago, I met this lady who's a CEO of a startup called Bike Light. It's Bike Light, not the light. It's Bike Lite. And her startup was doing the exact same thing. It was fascinating to see that it is not just that, it's the same concept that I was talking in class, but they've executed beautifully. So they want to keep bikes safe. And there were a lot of bikes in Santiago, and there were also like mobility solutions with the new Lime and a whole bunch of new bikes that was local to the region for bike sharing and scooties. The e-hailing market in LATAM is supposed to hit 1 billion by 2023. So it was very fascinating, and that is a very big local problem for them, more than maybe here for me in my neighborhood. So they had the technology by which they could actually say, hey, the Waze is not actually serving us as bikers, because it is just saying to drive in a road, and where bike lane is not available, it just says share the road, and I want to share it in the right healthy way so that it is safe for bikers. And they also have like a IoT glove the bikers can wear that would actually signal the biker's intent on the road. So there was a lot of possibilities like that. So that is a summary of autonomous vehicle business. So for those of you joining me, I'm talking about autonomous vehicle data. Specifically this week, I'm Sudha Jamte. I teach IoT and autonomous vehicle business at Stanford Continuing Studies, and have an exciting course called Business of Autonomous Vehicle Data at Driverless World School. And so I'm going to be talking about data in the car that comes from artificial intelligence. Richard, if you have any questions for me, you can jump in and ask at any time. And I know you are very big on the recent bots that you caught the Kiwi bot in Berkeley. So thank you for sharing that video. So when we talk about data in the car, it is very typical of people to assume that the data is what the car sees. So everybody knows for autonomous, to make a car autonomous, you have sensors and lidars in the car, and by which the car sees the road, and that data is what is collected and made sense of to inform the AI in the car, or deep learning algorithms by which the car learns to drive itself. So if I skin it down, it means the car does some kind of machine learning and deep learning. So it can do object recognition to say, hey, what am I seeing in the road? And everything, whether it is a pedestrian, whether it is another car, whether it is traffic lights, anything, or stuff fallen on the road, or any odd object, everything is an object. And so it's basic object recognition, and it says, okay, with a certain degree of certainty, I can say it's another car, or this thing is a moving object, I need to stop for it. And that is one. And then staying within the lane, it is identifying the lanes and then doing some kind of path planning to stay within the lane. That's how the car drives itself. And each time the car drives, they are actually collecting this data, but they're not doing much live with it at this point. They are actually collecting that to inform their inference model so that they can drive better in future. At least in the pilots, that's what they're doing. And the plan is, when this happens live, they should be able to send this live up to some extent, and then they would be able to improve the AI, so it becomes a learning AI. It is not today. When I see the Waymo car driving, it's not sending live data and learning and updated learning that is sending us an OTA. There's a delay in it. So what it is learning today. So when Uber had an accident, too bad, but that's not, I'm saying it too bad for the algorithm. It's very horrible for the person who got hurt in the accident, right? That's why it got booted out of the roads. But for the algorithm, it made a mistake, and there is no way that it can improve and start driving. It has to go, it sends all the data, they have to kind of rebuild and the learning models, and then it comes and builds that. So that is one data. Everybody understands when you say autonomous vehicle data, everybody thinks that is the data. I am not talking about that data. That data is important to build cognition in the car. That is how the car sees the road, drives itself autonomously. That is needed. But I'm talking about additional data that is inside the car. There is data from AI in the car. There is data that is coming from outside the environment into the car. At least 3 categories of data. And there is business value and disruption of many, many industries from this data. That is what I'm excited about. And when I say business of autonomous vehicle data, I'm talking about understanding this data, understanding the technology of this data, and how that is deployed inside companies or in partnerships in industries. And how do you make business sense of this data? What are the business models that can be derived from this data? And there's a lot of data-driven business models. So that's one topic we spoke about a couple of weeks back. So that is what, at a summary level, that I talk about when I say autonomous vehicle data. So looks like Richard has a question or comment. He says, I was going to say cars will still need to have cameras because not all bikes will have sensors. Yes. Autonomous vehicles have cameras and lidars, or just cameras in the case of Tesla, just to see the road. I mean, the cameras are like eyes for them. So if they don't have cameras, they don't know what's going on. So they are going to have cameras and other sensors just to watch the road, to observe, to know what else is happening. So that's not going to go away. So bikes having extra sensors is more like today, if you look at it, like in the internet world, we talk about everything being connected and becoming intelligent. And that means it adds connectivity to the internet, and it adds it gets data from the sensors, and something good can be done with this data that drives value, right? That's at a very abstract level. So if the bike is driving in the road, it is not a connected object. Actually, there are many sensors in the bike, so that bike can't be stolen. There are sensors in the bike that you can check to see how fast you're going, where you're going, location map, and kind of fun periphery things, not focused on the safety of the biker with respect to the fast car in the road. That is what I was talking about with as Bike Light. And I believe that Bike Light app is available globally. So you can check it out and download it from, I believe you can download it from their site, and it was going to the App Store in a couple of days. That's what I heard. So I can share an update after playing with that app if you want. But I don't think I'm the classic customer for them. So to your point, bikers will, before all bikes have sensors. I mean, that raises another interesting point. When you make a transition on something like an existing bike, 100% of any product is not going to become connected, which is true. Even if you have the best possible solution and you bake it in the bikes, it's only from the new bikes. So yes, but the beauty of this whole sensor solution for the bike is that when the bike is a dumb bike, meaning it is not an intelligent bike, it's not connected to the internet, there are no sensors, it's just a regular sports bike as it is today, then there is no way of communicating to it electronically. So it needs some kind of electronics to get an identity for it. So what is exciting for me is it gets an identity by adding a wearable. I've spoken about this before. How can the car communicate with everything else? The car can communicate with another car. The car can communicate with other infrastructure. This is what we spoke about as data from outside in. The car vehicle, V2X, right? V2V is the car communicating with other vehicles. V2I is car communicating with the infrastructure, with the dealer infrastructure, with the city infrastructure. Or the car can communicate with parking lots. It can talk to sensors on the road. It can check when there is a pothole. The road can inform the car whether it is got black ice or it is wet or slippery. And so all that data is the V2X data. And when you think of the biker coming in the middle of this, here is this intelligent car which is talking to all this infrastructure. It is talking to other cars. It's a whole ecosystem on the road. And the biker is a manual entity. Just like us, when we walk around, we are a manual entity and the car just sees an object. That is why accidents happen when the self-driving car is not fully ready to understand all possible scenarios of how the humans will behave. So I'm a proponent of somehow getting the wearable on our bodies to communicate with the car. And so with the biker example, the biker, by adding connectivity to it, by adding the glove, it gives some identity to the biker. It can be extended to communicate with the car, with the environment, with a whole bunch of other things. Hope that answers your question. So coming back to data in the car. So what I have covered so far is I gave a summary of what is autonomous vehicle business, and I was excited about my IoT Innovatech LATAM visit. So I've been telling you a little bit about stuff I saw in terms of the Bike Light, LITE app, which in my mind is a smart mobility solution in my definition of autonomous vehicle business. Now I'm getting into what is autonomous vehicle data, and I spoke about car cognition data, saying, hey, that is AV data, but that's not what I'm talking about when we are going to build business value from this data. I'm talking about data in the car. So we've covered this multiple times, but I'm going to do a quick run through for anybody joining new. So there are 3 digital twins in the car. The actual parts of the car is getting connected, which connected means it has sensors and it's actually getting internet connectivity. So by which you can actually see these days, the tires come with sensors. So when it starts losing air, you can actually find out that that's the case. Michelin tires have that for a long time now. before even bend and check, before you get a flat tire, or feeling like there's a flat tire, pulling over and checking, and messing up your drive and meeting or whatever you're running towards. So there are parts in the car that fail, and so that is coming from the manufacturer. How is the brake pad working, or what the different parts of the cars are working. And so they're tracking all that. They're tracking the entire supply chain of the car. In fact, companies, Volkswagen is doing that, Seat is doing that, a whole bunch of BMW has that, a whole bunch of companies are doing partnership with blockchain in the car to track the entire supply chain from when they get the part. Is that the same part that went into the making of the vehicle in the manufacturing? And then the digital twin aspect is tracking that wear and tear by all the sensors on the part to see whether some part is failing. And that is something that is changing product as we know it in product design and product development in the car, because they might expect it to take a certain amount of stress, because they expect a certain behavior of how many times somebody would brake, and how long it can run. And the customer might have a different behavior and press the brake too much. It doesn't even have to be something created by the customer. It could have just come from some behavior like in the car. Then we get recalls, right? So the recall problem would be solved much more easily for the manufacturer. But also, by knowing that, insurance wants to know how you're driving. So the three digital twins are the actual car parts, the actual environment in the car, the heating, the setting in the car, and the streaming data and everything else that I have in the Tesla. Then the third piece is the actual behavior data, right? The more when does the car drive, and when does this person stop, and what is the route? It's kind of gets to that creepy boundary of privacy is the third part. We don't have that mainstream yet. In fact, regulation is the only thing that is saving us, because regulation does not, everywhere in the world, does not allow individual data to be shared and built upon and exposed without the user's permission. But for a fleet, that was okay. So when Uber or Lyft or BlaBlaCar and all those mobility services, when they have our data, that is totally okay, because legally they can take the data and draw patterns and build services on top of it and do stuff today. So when we move to this world where everything is autonomous, it's going to be run by a fleet, then they can obviously track all the data. That becomes a very important piece. And what industry would be impacted? Retail would be impacted. A whole bunch of other industries, like knowing the behavior of the data of the user, of when they will come, when they will stop, what their patterns are. Logistics will be impacted. A whole bunch of industries are going to be impacted by that data. That's the three digital twins in the car. And then we spoke a little bit about V2V, V2X situation. So last week, where we left off is I was talking about data from outside coming into the car, and we covered the V2X scenarios, right? The car communicating with other cars, the car communicating with city infrastructure. So this is a huge opportunity for smart cities, because now you're getting all kinds of infrastructure in the city to become smart. Richard, do you have any more questions for me? You're full of questions usually for me. So, okay. So I'm going to come to a new content now, that we were talking about data coming from outside in, and one data. Yes. Okay. Thank you. So one data that I have not covered is city data. So cities are becoming smart, saying there is going to be what is called as multimodal transportation, which means we are not going to be saying, hey, I'm going to I'm just going to keep driving, and that's all I will do. And so you might take a bike sometime, you might take a car sometime, or you might say, hey, I'm just going to take some mobility service and I take my Lyft and go. And cities are planning for the center of the city to be car free, and then around it we want people to commute and get to the city. And so there, that is going to be some kind of public transportation or some kind of green efficient bikes and stuff that will bring them. And the cars are going to be for longer distance. And so when you have the lift bringing you, or you switch, take a lift up to the train station, and then you have the train taking you long distance. In fact, here in San Ramon, we have the BART, which is a long distance train. And from the train station, we have this autonomous vehicle that would actually take people to an office park nearby. So, autonomous vehicles today are deployed in smaller pilots within limited areas. And that would expand, obviously. But all that is together is multimodal transportation, which means the customer, the user, is going to take multiple modes of transportation. Why is that important for autonomous vehicle data when we're talking about it? Cities are waking up to the fact there's going to be many modes of transportation and a combination of transportation that different people might take different combination at different times. And when everything becomes connected, the data about where the person is driving, how many people are driving in this road, and information about every single trip. So when you see those bikes on the sides of the road, somebody picked up the bike at some point and then dumped it at some other point. And there's a lot of demand of people picking the bike at a certain place, or there's a lot of bikes happening at certain time of the day or certain areas. And all that information now is being demanded by the city, because finally it comes to a digital identity of the user. So as a mobility user in the city, so it could be my city that I need to go around on a daily basis, or I might be going on a visit, like I went to Chile or I go to Barcelona. Then I am still a user of all these services. So many cities are coming up with some kind of data. Barcelona has something called Centilio. They call it City OS broadly, which is all the data from the various mobility options that a city has. And they're collecting this data, and they're mandating that everybody who's driving any kind of vehicle in the city, who's offering a service, not the individual cars, they need to provide the data to the city. And there is technical specification called MDS, Mobility Data Specification. And they collect the data. They actually make it publicly available with open APIs. So now when we are talking about autonomous vehicle business and building smart mobility business, you could actually connect to a data from your city and see some patterns, and go solve unique problems that you want to solve for mobility. And so that is one. So that is again data from outside the city. And so can you imagine of ways by which you can take that data, that is city's data, and then bring that to the car, combined with something that is happening in the city, yeah, that is happening in the car? So can you bring the data from outside the car and combine with data inside the car? So inside the car, what do we have? We have the 3 digital twins. So I'm not talking about um, the first digital twin, which is the parts of the car. Let's leave that aside. The environment of the car, or the user behavior. The user behavior digital twin is very much tied to the city smart mobility data. If you think about it, if I'm going in a certain route, if I'm stopping for Starbucks at a certain time, and I go there, certain time of the day, this is my behavior. It maps, correlates very directly with the city collecting data, saying, hey, where are people driving? What kind of mode are they driving? Where are they stopping? What time of the day? It's the same thing. It's just a different dimension. So you could actually layer up and create a whole new business on top of that. Can you imagine what kind of business you can build with that? The best way, yeah, I'm just giving you a second, like a few seconds to process this, to think what, so the business that you would build will be a very data driven business. The way to think about this would be, you can actually think about the customer. Richard, you have your project that you want to do for making Main Street smart, and you could actually take this mobility data in there, and add extra dimensions to it. So instead of saying the user comes to Main Street and how do I manage the traffic and how do I know who they are, now the user is actually coming in a mobility device. So we have this in Denmark. IKEA did a project and they said, I would fund for the car to bring the user to my shop. And so then they would know information about the user, what they're coming with an intent to go to IKEA because IKEA is funding it. Or Waymo has a deal with Walmart the same way, saying, when you buy something online in Walmart, you can come and pick it up, and Waymo would give you a vehicle to bring you to Walmart. This is in Phoenix Limited Pilot. And things like that means data. So any business that you would marry this data with the city data, the multimodal mobility data, is going to be a pure data-driven business, and you could help your retailer. So Richard is saying something, yes, smarter streets and traffic lights in particular drives me crazy to sit at a red light when no one else is around. So already that is happening in many cities, beyond any data that is coming from the car, that they are making the traffic lights to be smarter, so that when in Palo Alto, when you drive in Palo Alto, Richard, you don't have to stop even at night when you go. If there's nobody else on the road, you'll get continuous green. You might think you just happen to have got continuous green, but it is intelligent and it is collecting, it is checking whether there's nobody else on any of the other sides, and say, okay, I can let this car go. That is happening in Palo Alto, I know for sure. And there are many cities who have made their traffic lights smarter. And so that definitely is happening. But I was talking about the Main Street, all the shops in Main Street. They want to bring us as traffic, and we want to go there for their services. So that mapping has been a marketer's holy grail, saying, exactly if we know when the user wants to go for what kind of services, what do they want. If we can give it to them, hey, then, it's good for the retailer, it's good for the user. But there's a creepiness factor. If they geofence me and give me a coupon, then have I given them permission? If I go in an autonomous vehicle, or if I go in a shared mobility vehicle, and they know that this is my favorite spot and this is when I crave for my coffee. I drink coffee when I travel. I had beautiful coffee in Chile. So back home, I'm back to my child. So if they know my pattern, they could actually geofence and give me the coupon, right? I've said this before. Target throws a coupon at me for Starbucks, which is inside Target in Saratoga when I just drive around nearby, and it expires within so many minutes. So they expect me to go and get my Starbucks first, but I don't. I need it after I've done some shopping, which is not what they're thinking about. But they could do that for all kinds of Main Street shops, and do that in partnership with the car data or the mobility data from the city, getting into the behavior data of the customer. So there's a huge opportunity. The best way to think about it is pick an industry that you're passionate about. You want to solve a problem. What is their problem? Or pick a problem like the bike light solution. I want to keep bikers safe. So think about, I want to give mobility to seniors, is what Voyage.auto is doing with their autonomous vehicles. So that's one way of thinking about it. So I'm going to make a transition. So I want to wrap up what we were talking so far. I went back to say, what is autonomous vehicle business? And I focused on picking a problem to solve and how to build an autonomous vehicle, so a business around it, which is more a smart mobility business. And I gave that bike light from Santiago as an example. Then we talked about the data in the car, and we said car cognition data that the car uses to drive itself autonomously is there, but I'm thinking about different data. And we talked about the digital twins in the car. And we talked about what data comes from outside the car into the car. And we talked about V2V, V2I, and V2IX infrastructure, right? The car talks to the other cars or infrastructure. And the other data is city is collecting multimodal mobility data that it is collecting, that could be combined with, and it's offering it as open API. Denmark has it, Copenhagen has it, whole bunch of cities have it. So if you go to GitHub and you say city of Los Angeles, it's a dash between city dash of dash Los Angeles, and I can put the URL here also. Then you have the GitHub of this mobile data specification that LA has built, and 12 other US cities are using that. They're using that as a standard. Why do they need a standard? Because you cannot have a, a different standard for each city saying, hey, you're offering mobility services. Now, this is the standard by which you give this data to LA. And then you cross over and then you come to San Jose, and San Jose, hey, this is the format you have to give us the data. There'll be a nightmare for this company building mobility solution. So there's got to be some standard. So they can say, okay, this is the data we can give, and they, build a packet of the data and they send it to different cities as they go drive around or ride around, offer services in different cities. But the beauty is there's a lot of this data that is available as open data, and there's tons of platforms that is evolving. Again, I try to find out whether there is one standard. I don't know the standard in Europe. I've seen it from different cities. I've seen 12 cities in US. I know there are there's a Smart Nation initiative in Singapore. I have not seen the data being shared publicly. I heard from Rob about the data from China is walled within China, so that cannot be accessed outside. There is Smart City in Dubai. I have not seen the open data version of that. There's a whole bunch of digital identity projects that is cropping up from the governments or one partnership or on private public partnerships that is coming up for various cities. So or various countries. So I heard of India coming up with one digital identity for all transportation, for entire multimodal transportation. There will be one digital identity that is deployed by the government, but all the private entities will actually connect to this data, and there would be a partnership between the public and private entities, anybody who's offering mobility in India. That is evolving. So all that is data play. And so it is good for you if you're in the space to think about data, but the best way to think about it is get an introduction to what this data is, but then focus on, hey, whose problem can I solve? Can I solve a problem for a specific segment of user? Can I solve a problem for a specific segment of, for a specific industry? So if there is enough interest, I can actually dig into this open APIs and open data. In the Business of Autonomous Vehicle Data course, I'm going to do that definitely. But if there is enough interest in here, I can come back and share some of that, and we can have an exercise on what kind of business business can be built. We are in very early stages of all this, so it might look very abstract today when you're saying, hey, this data from the city, and go build a business around it. So I think what we need is like a mind shift. So stop thinking about the autonomous vehicle as getting the vehicle to drive. Go past that to smart mobility. That's the first step. And think about what problem you want to solve. So coming back to our AV data discussion, we covered the 3 digital twins in the car. Car cognition data is not what I'm talking about here. And the V2X situation we've covered, the city data with the specification. In fact, I've been talking about MDS as a mobility data specification. There is also a bike data specification that is evolving as a standard. So bike companies don't want a generic mobility data specification. So if it is not the bike, shared vehicle, the Ubers and Lyfts of the world, or BlaBlaCars, when they give data, the bikers don't want that to be the same specification, because bikers go in bike lanes and their needs are different, and people pick up bikes and drop bikes, and it's a very different custom mobility customer compared to somebody who would just get a carpooling or a lift for car sharing, so ride sharing, right? Ride hailing. So there's again 2 different specifications that is evolving across cities. And so all that data is amazing data that you can build on and build a whole bunch of services. So that would be a very good exercise to even like brainstorm and look into this data if that's of interest to you. So coming back, so we are close to the halfway point. So I want to go back to the topic I promised today, which is the data from AI in the car. And AI and artificial intelligence has been, over exaggerated, and people get too confused about AI because they call anything and everything as AI. So when I'm talking about data from AI in the car, so what is AI in the car? Yes, the car drives, there's using deep learning algorithms, there's inference models, that is AI. But I don't get to touch that. The company that makes the car autonomous is going to own that. And that's not public. It's never going to be public. So that's not mine. So I'm going to leave that aside. But beyond that, there are many telematics related AI. There is one startup which actually says, hey, there is a technology platform that is being created in the car by the car makers, OEMs. And when you integrate with tier one players, which is like, the Panasonic or Sony, who offers your Bluetooth, or Aero Electronics, which offers all kinds of parts in the car. I had a student from Aero Electronics in my last autonomous vehicle bootcamp class at Stanford, and they are all looking at data in the car and how it integrates with the existing technology platform in the car. And that gets more and more complex. So it is like old legacy systems, because the technology in the car has been around for a long time. So integrating that becomes complex. So there's a bunch of AI that makes that easy. There is telematics from the data that of the car itself, how it is driving. So there's a lot of AI around that, because there's a lot of data, and to just make sense of the data. And then there is the different AI interfaces that you see in the car. So does anybody have a comment on, when I say AI in the car, what comes to mind? Like, as a user, what is AI in the car looks like to you? I told you I'm a teacher. If you don't ask me questions, I'll ask you questions. Okay, so the experience of the environment, right? So when I'm driving, forget autonomous vehicles for a minute. Today, when I drive inside the vehicle, there is a lot of experience, right? It's not just like from the past where you just have a wheel and you just drive. Maybe you have a radio. You have Bluetooth to connect to your phone. You have more and more fancy speakers. You have some augmented reality or virtual reality that is available in a very experiential way, which is not up on your face, so you don't see that. But there's pilots by all major car makers. I actually, in fact, did an Axios article about this. I called it about data. The topic, I think, in the title is about data, but it is more about data from all the AR, VR experiences that is going to be in the car. So that produces a lot of data. So if you drive a Mercedes in a class, I think it was in the E class, and then they were expanding to other class vehicles, which I have not checked. But they have this app called Ask Mercedes. In fact, Richard here has worked with me on that project. So Richard, the Ask Mercedes project that we worked on is AR in the car. And what is augmented reality in the car? So the AR that Mercedes is offering is basically they took their owner manual and they've digitized it and decided that people should not be picking up a big bulk book to say, how does this part work and what is wrong and with some part. And so what they did is they just made it into an augmented reality app. So you have an app called Ask Mercedes, and you point your phone at different parts inside the car, and it will actually look at what it is, which means it is doing some kind of computer vision, seeing what the image is, and say, that's your Bluetooth. And then it will pull up the digital manual of what the Bluetooth is. Even on a Tesla, we don't have that sophisticated digital manual today. But in all the latest Mercedes, you have that, and you don't have to think twice. And you get into the car, you just point at it and say, okay, how does this work? How does this work? And then it pops up for different parts. It sounds boring because it's not as sexy as driving, and creating an environment, which also they're all adding in the car. right? They want to add that augmented reality experience in the car. They want to add virtual reality experience in the car, and they are doing that. But in a very, I like the Ask Mercedes example because it's a very simple use case. Best product is something that is not up on your face. You don't even think of it as a product. You just experience it. And why is that? An AI, augmented reality, virtual reality, voice are all AI in the car. So the augmented reality AR app, how did Mercedes give this? So what they do is they have taken what the inside of the car looks like, and then collected a whole bunch of images, and then built a augmented reality solution. In fact, a company called Vuforia is the one who partnered with Mercedes to offer that augmented reality solution. If you check out Vuforia, and I have no affiliation for any brands, anything that I mention, I try to stay very, very neutral. So, but I met the Vuforia team, and they work on a lot of augmented reality solutions. And for Mercedes, it's an inference model. Inference model is that the AI model that has been created, that is sitting in a piece of software at the edge of a device, in this case in the car. And so there's an inference model that is baked in and sent to the cars. So on the business side, one interesting thing to look at what it is. So now when I go in and I sat in a e-class and I tried the app and I point at it and I get something, I don't get something, it works up to a point for me, and it worked actually very well. But suppose there is a situation where it did not work the way they expected. All the data is being collected by the car, by this the AR inference software is sitting there collecting all this data. But I'm not paying for connectivity, so Mercedes is not sending that out to the cloud right away. So it becomes a business decision of, are you going to collect the learning from the car? Remember, we talked about how the car is constantly learning when it is driving autonomously, and they send that inference model to the cloud for enhancing that learning and bringing that inference model as a OTA back to the car. So that's a cost, right? So it's one thing to build an extra app and deploying it for the user, so it helps them, but enhances their brand and value for the customer. Then once it is sent to the car, now if it is learning constantly, then that data is sitting in the car. There's value in the data, but it is expensive for Mercedes to bring that data back to themselves. If they're going to send the data out from a car, there's going to be a bandwidth cost. And if they make me come and sync the car in some form, then it's a behavior change, and they're asking something of the user that's going to change things. So you have to think about how to get access to this data and what value you create. So if they create value for me as a customer and say, bring your car and we'll give you an enhanced value in some form, then maybe I'll be motivated to go. Maybe they can even offer like a service on top of that. I mean, if they say your augmented reality app will never break and you will learn all your parts and we'll offer that as a service, I won't care as much. I might fidget with my Bluetooth and never understood how to use it, but not think it's valuable enough before it breaks, and say I'm going to pay a service that I know about all the parts in the car. That's not going to be interesting. But if they give me an augmented reality experience in the car, I mean, what is exciting about this for me is, by doing this with Vuforia, getting this Ask Mercedes app, Mercedes has taken the first step to bring AR into the car in a very subtle way. So now they can expand that and create an AR environment for me as I'm driving. And that could become the way I interact with the car. And if they do that, then, and it's I'm dependent on it, and that's way of life for me. Then if they say, I'll make sure this environment won't vanish, and you'll go back to 2018, and it'll just be the boring car interface. If they say that after I'm hooked, then I would like the service, right? Then that's where the data as a service model comes in, and I would pay for it. So Richard has got a comment. AI in the car means that my auto is collecting information about usage, external factors. Yes. Yes, definitely. It is collecting. Definitely, any form of AI is collecting usage pattern. That's a given. Whether it is collecting usage on your behavior or it is watching for something that's happening in the car which is beyond your control. We don't know. But when they give you an environment in with AR, typically they are watching you on how you interact. So it's easier, instead of saying here's the driver's manual that has become automated, it is easier to think of the Pokemon. So there's Pokemons and people go catch them, and I see them all the time still, like outside. And think of that inside your car. There's going to be this environment, right? Think of it in the future when it becomes fully autonomous. The car has to communicate with you. It's going to be this empty space, and the car has to communicate with you in some form. That's going to be some kind of AI. And it's not going to be just a voice in the sky talking to you. It's going to have some kind of AR VR interface that is going to check whether you're comfortable and are you doing all right. It's going to have sensor data, and using the sensor data is going to check whether you're all right before even it asks you whether you're all right. And it is going to actually have some kind of communication interface. It's very hard to comprehend that today because it doesn't exist. And we sit in the car, we drive our car, we just go. So that's AR VR in the car, and there's the data that comes with it. Today companies like Vuforia are building that for the OEMs, the car makers, and that data is not open. So my vision is all the data that creates the environment with the digital twins, it feeds into the digital twin, right, that we were talking about. So that is going to become more open and accessible when we have the data platform in the car that you can plug in. So if you are trying to build a startup and you want to create an experience for a retailer, you want to create an experience that for the person driving in the car, then you can make my experience, the easiest thing is you can see whether I'm driving for work, am I driving for pleasure, is this long distance vacation, am I driving alone, am I driving with somebody, my preferred partner that I seem to be driving all the time. I'm giving from a data point of view. Then you could offer different experiences for me. It is going to happen that I'm going to watch Netflix or whatever else equivalent into the future, different from sitting with Wi-Fi and doing emails. I don't believe email is going to go away even by 2030, unfortunately, but maybe I'm doing some messaging. But all that is possible when you tap into the AI and enhance that, right? So the other AI which people don't think of as AI is voice in the car. And I spoke to the CED guys, and they had actually done the integration of Alexa in the car. And Amazon has this Amazon Auto, which actually gives you voice in the car. And it obviously promises a lot more about learning how your moods are, what's your emotion while you're driving. All that is AI. So when I'm talking and it gets my voice and it is listening to that, and how it came about is very organic, where people started connecting their Google Homes or Alexa to the car and through the phone, and then they could talk to it. And it was like just fun, right? Like you talk to Alexa and ask like simple things. That is not like, life-threatening, mission-critical things. But there is also car voice being baked in the car more and more. In fact, in Mercedes cars, there is voice in the car, which is not Alexa or Google Home. It's homegrown Mercedes' voice API, and it does such a fantastic job. It's very well developed over many years. Again, I have no affiliation with anybody, but I like to try anything and everything. So I'm not affiliated to any one brand. But Mercedes does have a well-developed voice API in the car. And what does it do? You can actually interact. In fact, I think Richard had also brought this and shared this last time when we were discussing right here. And instead of saying Alexa this and okay Google this, and you just say okay Google, it's open up. It's going to listen to me and say something. But so it is. The invocation phrase is Mercedes, and say Mercedes, do this. Mercedes.
Can you say something?
No. Bye.
Okay.
So the voice in the car, think of that is an AI in the car. What can it do for you? I mean, one thing is that Amazon is doing this, Mercedes is doing this, Google is doing this, it's all fine. But the voice becomes a very, very important kind of data in the car. So any kind of sound, I don't know, it could be my dog, the voice might not be me. There are different people in the car. Today we are looking at voice using natural language processing. So all these voice devices collect our data, send it somewhere to the cloud, have some kind of API, and they're applying natural language processing and trying to make sense of it in the language that it is being offered. And then they look at whatever we are asking based on what the question translates to in English or Spanish or whatever language. And then they get information and say, hey, here's the weather, or here's the song that you wanted me to play, or something very peripheral, right? But when that becomes the interface with the car, voice is going to become very, very critical, because the car is going to drive itself. The car is going to take us to places. So would you not want the car to stop when you feel like, oh my God, I forgot something, I want to stop, or I'm not comfortable, pull over? How are you going to communicate? Are you going to go and press an app, or you look for buttons? It's not going to happen like that. Voice is the natural way we communicate. So voice in the car is a very critical thing. And do you want that data to just be left with the one technology player who just offers that interface? It is going to open up, and you're going to have voice in the car to build services on top of that. So what can you imagine what kind of services you can build? One easy thing with the example I was giving, asking the car to pull over, is, hey, maybe somebody feels sick and they say, hey, they might be saying, okay, I'm going to drive, summon the car, drive me to work, and work might be a predetermined address. Now they're feeling sick and say, I want you to take me to Kaiser, to the hospital, right? And they could just say that. In an emergency, the car should be able to understand the natural language processing, make sense of it, know that it has to listen, know that it has to change the destination of where it is going, and go. It cannot be like in my lift today, I'll be going to a specific place, I decided to go somewhere else, I have to say, oh, I want to add another stop, or I want to change my destination, fidget around in the app, and then go do that. That's not going to happen. So voice is a very, very critical kind of data in the car. And so think about it. Now, if you think about any industry, think about different kind of customers, what kind of value you want to provide to them. There's a huge opportunity, especially if you're an entrepreneur, or if you are one of the OEMs in the value chain of the car. If you're watching this, there's a huge opportunity. Voice is not just about, it's going to be the interaction with the customer, but I believe it is going to offer a digital signature for the person. So like we are using facial recognition, and then you can actually identify the same person anywhere in the city, voice is going to become a signature. Who is going to own that signature? Is that going to be you? Should that be owned by one private entity? Maybe you want to come up with a blockchain based solution for that. So think about this, and I believe we can talk a lot more about this voice in the car, or building data services in the car, like building services based on the open APIs that's available. So I love feedback. We are coming to the end of the hour. So if that is interesting for you, I can pick it up from there. Or if you have any other question that you want to talk to me, you can find me on driverlessworldschool.com, or you can tweet me or find me on LinkedIn, and I will come back and pick it up next week. So Richard, AI in the car means that my auto is collecting information. Yes, that's something you'd said before. Yeah. So all that information. So anytime it's collecting information, think about who owns the data. Should they be owning the data? Should that be open? If it is open, what would you do with that data? Who would you help with that data? I mean, I'm still talking at an abstract level, but if you work with a specific industry, or if you're thinking of solving a specific problem, talk to me. Then I can bring it down to your company or your product or your area of passion, and then we can take that as an example and delve deeper, like I was talking about the keeping the bike safe example, and I'm happy to do that. So with that, I'm going to wrap up. Find me on driverlessworldschool.com. I've extended the autonomous vehicle, the business of autonomous vehicle data course till May 20, but I will close it when I hit 30 people. So now I have expanded to 2 classes instead of 1, because I had this large company who came and said they want a class just for their people, about 20 people. So I'm going to keep like 20 to 30 max, but I might expand to more classes if I have more people. And I'll be running these classes starting from May 20, the week of May 20th. So I'm going to keep registration open till that. But talk to me. if that's of interest to you. And I'm excited to follow up back again on our live Q&A next week. And thank you, everybody, for joining me. And ciao. Bye, Richard. Thank you for your questions.